I remember the summer of 2019 like it was a scene from a movie, one of those where you're not just a spectator but a part of it, where every moment clings to your soul. It was the summer that taught me more about life than all my 16 years combined. This is my story, a tale that unfolded in the quiet suburbs where every house held its secrets, and every shadow whispered tales of the past. Growing up, I was the only child of Daniel and Sarah Thompson. Our home was a quaint two-story house in Willow Creek, a suburb that seemed to have more trees than people. I remember the oak in our backyard, standing like a silent guardian, watching over my childhood adventures. Our home was a sanctuary of warmth, filled with my mom's laughter and my dad's deep, comforting voice. The living room, with its worn-out sofa and the old TV, was the heart of our family, where we gathered every evening, sharing stories of our day. My parents, both high school teachers, had instilled in me a love for learning. Dad's passion for history often led us to discussions about civilizations long gone, while Mom's love for literature introduced me to worlds beyond our own. Our house was a treasure trove of books, old and new, each carrying the scent of a different story. My room, a small attic transformed into a teenager's haven, was my world. The walls were lined with posters of my favorite bands and movies, and a small telescope sat by the window, my portal to the stars. I spent countless nights gazing into the cosmos, pondering life's mysteries. I was a regular high school boy, with dreams as big as the sky and fears hidden deep within. My friends, a group of misfits like me, were my escape from the mundane. We would hang out at the local diner, sharing milkshakes and stories, laughing away our worries. Life was simple, or so I thought. As the summer of 2019 approached, my parents planned a vacation to Europe, a trip they had been dreaming of since their honeymoon. I was excited for them, yet a part of me dreaded the thought of being alone. I was independent, yes, but the house without them felt like an empty shell. "I think you're old enough to take care of the house, Alex," Dad said one evening, his voice laced with confidence. Mom nodded, her eyes reflecting a mix of pride and concern. "Just remember, the Thompsons never backed down from a challenge." And so, it was decided. They would embark on their adventure, leaving me to fend for myself. The day they left, I stood at the doorway, waving goodbye, unaware that the summer would unfold a chapter of my life that would forever haunt me. School kept me busy, and the days rolled by in a blur of classes and homework. Each evening, I would return to the empty house, the silence greeting me like an old friend. I filled my time with books and music, finding solace in the familiar. It was on one of those quiet evenings that my life took a turn into the unknown. I had just returned from school, the house welcoming me with its familiar embrace. I remember walking into the kitchen, the smell of spices lingering in the air, remnants of Mom's last cooked meal. The clock on the wall ticked away, marking the passage of time. Deciding to cook dinner, I realized we were out of some essentials. Just a quick trip to the store, I thought, grabbing my jacket. The evening was settling in, the sky painted in hues of orange and purple, the air crisp with the promise of night. Little did I know, as I stepped out into the twilight, that I was leaving behind not just my home, but the innocence of my youth. For within the shadows of the quiet suburb, danger lurked, waiting to shatter the tranquility of Willow Creek. The local store was a short walk from my house, nestled between Mrs. Wilson's flower shop and Joe's Pizzeria. The familiar jingle of the bell greeted me as I entered, and Mr. Larson, the store owner, gave me a nod. "Evening, Alex." "Your usual?" he asked, already reaching for the bread and eggs. "Yeah, and some milk too, please," I replied, scanning the shelves for anything else we might need. Mr. Larson always had a story to tell, usually about his college days or some adventurous fishing trip. That evening was no different. As he recounted his latest escapade, I listened, half amused, half absorbed in my own thoughts. Leaving the store with a bag of groceries, I noticed the streetlights flickering to life. The evening had deepened, and a chill ran down my spine. I shrugged it off, attributing it to the cool breeze. The streets were unusually quiet, the usual bustle of Willow Creek seemingly hushed. I quickened my pace, eager to get home and start cooking. As I approached our house, something felt off. It was too silent, the windows dark. I assumed I'd forgotten to leave the lights on, but a nagging feeling told me something was wrong. Pushing the thought aside, I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The house greeted me with its familiar smell, a mix of old books and lavender. I set the groceries down and headed to the kitchen. That's when I heard it, a faint noise, like something being moved. My heart skipped a beat. Maybe it's just the house settling, I thought, trying to brush off the unease. I began to prepare dinner, chopping vegetables, the sound of the knife against the cutting board echoing in the empty house. Then, there it was again, a sound, louder this time, like something being dragged. It was coming from upstairs. My mind raced. Could it be a burglar? I remembered the stories of break-ins in the neighborhood, dismissed by many as just rumors. But now, the possibility felt all too real. I grabbed a kitchen knife, not sure what I'd do with it. Tiptoeing up the stairs, my heart pounded in my chest. The noises grew louder, more frantic. It was definitely not the house settling. I reached the top of the stairs and peered down the hallway. The door to my parents' room was ajar, light spilling out onto the floor. Creeping closer, I heard voices, gruff, hushed. Panic gripped me. Robbers. In our house. I should have called the police, but fear rooted me to the spot. Then, a loud crash from the room jolted me into action. I burst into the room, knife in hand, and the scene before me froze me in place. Two figures, cloaked in the dim light, were rummaging through my parents' belongings. One of them turned, and our eyes met. Recognition dawned on me. I had seen them before, lingering around the abandoned lot near the school, known troublemakers with a reputation for drug use. They were as startled as I was, but their surprise quickly turned to menace. "Who the hell are you?" one of them growled, stepping towards me. I backed away, my mind racing. This was not how I had imagined my evening going. The robbers advanced, and in a moment of sheer terror, I turned and ran. They were after me, their heavy footsteps echoing through the house. I dashed down the hallway, my only thought to escape. The house that had been my sanctuary now felt like a maze, each turn a potential trap. I needed a plan, and fast. My heart pounding in my ears, I made a split-second decision that would change the course of that night, a decision that would lead me into the very heart of the terror that had invaded our home. Adrenaline surged through my veins as I hurtled down the hallway, the clamor of the robbers close behind. The house, once a familiar terrain, now seemed alien and menacing. I needed a place to hide, to think, but every second was precious and hesitation could be costly. In a desperate bid, I veered towards the living room, a plan forming in my mind. The room was shrouded in darkness, save for the faint glow of the streetlights filtering through the curtains. My eyes scanned the room, landing on the large, antique cabinet. It was a risky hiding spot, but it was my only chance. I dove behind the cabinet just as the robbers burst into the room. Their heavy breaths and frantic whispers filled the air. I held my breath, praying they wouldn't find me. The minutes stretched on, each second an eternity, as they ransacked the room. Then, by some stroke of luck, they moved on, their footsteps receding. I waited, counting the seconds, before finally emerging from my hiding spot. My heart still raced, but now I was driven by a need to act. I tiptoed to the kitchen, grabbed my phone, and dialed 911. But as fate would have it, just as I was about to speak, a hand clamped over my mouth, and I was yanked backwards. The phone clattered to the floor, the line still open. The robbers, having doubled back, had caught me off guard. One of them sneered, "Thought you could call the cops, huh? Bad move, kid." Panic engulfed me as they dragged me towards the basement door. In a moment of sheer desperation, I bit the hand covering my mouth and elbowed my captor. He cursed, loosening his grip, and I broke free. I dashed for the basement, the only place I could think to go. The basement was dark and cluttered, a labyrinth of boxes and old furniture. I knew this place. I had spent countless hours here as a kid, playing hide-and-seek with my friends. If there was any place in the house where I could outmaneuver them, it was here. I heard the robbers thundering down the stairs after me. My mind raced, searching for a plan. Then it hit me, the old storage closet. It had a sturdy lock, one my dad had installed years ago. I sprinted to the closet, flung open the door, and dove inside. Seconds later, the robbers appeared, searching the basement with flashlights. Their beams of light swept over the closet, but they moved on, not suspecting I could be inside. With trembling hands, I locked the door from inside and sank to the floor, my heart pounding. The robbers prowled the basement, cursing and knocking things over in their search. I clutched my phone, hoping the 911 operator was still on the line, that help was on its way. Time seemed to stretch on forever in that dark, cramped space. I could hear the robbers' frustrated voices, their footsteps echoing in the basement. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the noise stopped. Silence fell over the house, a silence that was almost as terrifying as the chase. I waited, not daring to breathe, wondering if they had given up or if this was just another trick. Minutes ticked by, and I realized I couldn't stay hidden forever. I needed to know if they were gone, if it was safe to come out. With a deep breath, I unlocked the closet and peeked out. The basement was dark, the only light coming from the small window near the ceiling. I crept out, my senses heightened, listening for any sign of the intruders. But the house was silent, eerily so. I made my way upstairs, each step cautious, each creak of the floorboards sending shivers down my spine. The living room was a mess, items strewn all over, a testament to the chaos that had ensued. I reached the front door and hesitated. Should I venture outside? Seek help? Or was it safer inside, hidden away? That's when I heard it, the distant sound of sirens, growing louder. Relief washed over me. The police were here. I opened the door, the cool night air hitting my face. The street was bathed in the flashing lights of police cars. Officers were approaching, their expressions a mix of concern and determination. I stepped out, my legs feeling like jelly, and told them everything. They listened intently, their radios crackling with updates. As I recounted the events, I realized how close I had come to a much grimmer fate. But the night wasn't over yet. The robbers had vanished, and now it was a race against time to catch them before they could harm anyone else. As the police swarmed the house, I stood on the lawn, draped in a blanket an officer had given me. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions: fear, relief, disbelief. The police moved efficiently, their flashlights piercing the darkness, searching every nook and cranny of our violated home. One of the officers, a kind-faced man named Officer Reynolds, approached me. "We're going to catch them, son. You're safe now," he assured me. His words were meant to comfort, but the night's terror still clung to me like a second skin. Inside, the police found evidence of the hasty retreat the robbers had made. A back window was smashed, a clear sign of their escape route. They had managed to take some valuables with them, a harsh reminder of their desperate motives. I overheard snippets of police conversation about a string of recent burglaries in the area, each one more brazen than the last. It dawned on me then that my encounter was part of a larger, more sinister pattern. As I recounted the events to Officer Reynolds, I remembered the 911 call. I called 911. The line was open. Maybe they heard something, I suggested, hopeful. He nodded, speaking into his radio. Moments later, another officer confirmed my call had been traced, and they were working to gather any useful information from it. The night wore on, the flashing lights and hushed conversations a surreal backdrop to my thoughts. My parents, on the other side of the world, were unaware of the danger their son had just faced. The thought of them enjoying their vacation, oblivious to my ordeal, was both comforting and distressing. Eventually, Officer Reynolds approached me with an update. "We've got a lead. Witnesses saw a car speeding away from here. We're on it, Alex." Go inside and try to get some rest. We'll have officers stationed outside all night." Rest was the last thing on my mind, but I nodded. The thought of being alone in the house was daunting, but the presence of the officers outside was a small comfort. As I stepped back into the house, the destruction the robbers had wrought was heart-wrenching. Family photos lay scattered. Drawers were pulled out, their contents strewn across the floor. It was a stark reminder of the violation we had suffered. I tried to clean up, to restore some order to the chaos, but each overturned item was a reminder of the night's terror. Eventually, I retreated to my room, the events of the evening replaying in my mind. Sleep was elusive, every creak and groan of the house a reminder of the danger I had faced. The next morning, the sun's rays brought little comfort. The house felt different, tainted by the previous night's events. I called my parents, the sound of their voices a balm to my frayed nerves. They were shocked, worried, and insisted on cutting their trip short. I tried to assure them I was okay, not wanting to ruin their vacation, but the concern in their voices was palpable. In the days that followed, the police investigation intensified. The local news was abuzz with the story of the break-in and my narrow escape. Neighbors expressed their shock and sympathy, but their words did little to ease the sense of violation that lingered. 2 weeks passed in a blur of police updates and restless nights. Then, one afternoon, Officer Reynolds returned with news. The robbers had been caught. They had been found in a rundown motel on the outskirts of town, high on drugs and surrounded by stolen goods. The relief I felt was immense, yet it was tempered by the knowledge of the trauma they had inflicted, not just on me, but on others in the community. The robbers, 2 men in their late 20s, had been responsible for a string of burglaries, their actions fueled by desperation and addiction. As I looked at the photos of the robbers, their faces a stark reminder of the terror they had caused, I couldn't help but feel a mix of pity and revulsion. Their lives had spiraled into a cycle of crime and substance abuse, leading them to that fateful night in my home. The events of that summer night in 2019 changed me. I had come face to face with a harsh reality, one that was far removed from the safety and innocence of my earlier life. It was a reminder of the fragility of our existence, of the thin line that separates normalcy from chaos. But it was also a testament to resilience, to the strength we find in ourselves when faced with adversity. As I helped my parents restore our home in the days that followed, I knew that we would overcome this, that the shadows of that night would eventually fade, leaving us stronger in their wake. The days following the arrest of the robbers were a whirlwind of emotions and activity. My parents returned home, their faces etched with worry and relief. The reunion was bittersweet, filled with hugs and tears. Our house, once a symbol of familial warmth and safety, now felt like a fortress, a bulwark against the chaos of the outside world. The police came by for my statement, their presence a reminder of the ordeal we had endured. I recounted the events, my voice steady but my hands trembling. The officers were sympathetic, their eyes reflecting a mix of professionalism and empathy. They explained that the robbers had confessed, their spree of burglaries fueled by a desperate need for drug money. As I sat there, giving my statement, the reality of it all hit me. I had been a mere bystander in a play where fate had cast me as a key character. The randomness of it was unsettling, the thought that anyone could become a victim at any time. In the following days, our neighborhood transformed. Neighbors who once merely nodded in passing now stopped to talk, to share their concerns and offer support. A community meeting was held, with discussions on safety and preventive measures. It was heartening to see the community come together, a silver lining in the dark cloud that had hovered over us. At school, I became somewhat of an unintentional hero. Friends and classmates approached me, their eyes wide with a mix of awe and curiosity. They asked questions, some timid, some blunt, about that night. I answered them, not wanting my experience to define me, but also understanding their need to make sense of what had happened. My parents and I spent many evenings talking about the incident, each conversation a step towards healing. We discussed everything from installing a new security system to the broader issues of crime and substance abuse in society. These discussions, though painful, brought us closer together, strengthening our bond as a family. The police informed us that the robbers were being charged and would likely face significant time in prison. It was a relief, yet it also raised questions about the circumstances that had led them down such a path. I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness for their wasted lives, ensnared by addiction and desperation. As I reflect on those harrowing days, I realize how the experience has changed me. I've become more cautious, more aware of my surroundings. But I've also developed a deeper appreciation for the fragility of life and the importance of community. The ordeal taught me about the strength of the human spirit, about the courage we can muster in the face of adversity. Our house, once tainted by the invasion, slowly regained its warmth. Laughter returned, and with it, a sense of normalcy. We repaired the physical damages, but the emotional scars, though fading, remained as a reminder of our ordeal. As I conclude this chapter of our family story, I turn to you, the reader. Write in the comments below the video, what do you think about this story? Have you experienced similar situations in your life? Click the like button and subscribe if you like our stories. Back in 2020, I was just a 22-year-old guy with a life that had spiraled out of control, a far cry from the childhood I had known. My name's Jake, and this is my story, a tale of darkness, redemption, and the twisted paths we sometimes walk. Growing up in the suburbs of Cleveland, Ohio, my life was pretty standard. My parents, Mike and Linda, were hardworking folks who gave me everything: love, comfort, and a sense of right and wrong. Our home was a typical suburban dwelling, its walls echoing with laughter and the usual family squabbles. The backyard, with its swing set and oak tree, was the stage for my childhood adventures. My best friend, Tony, lived just down the street. We were inseparable, two peas in a pod. Tony's family was wealthier than mine, and his house, with its sprawling lawn and fancy gadgets, was like a second home to me. We shared everything from video games to secrets. It was with Tony that I first smoked pot. We were young, barely teenagers, and curious. It was fun at first, an exciting rebellion. But that changed one night at a nightclub when we were 18. Someone offered us something stronger: heroin. It was supposed to be a one-time thing, a thrill, but it hooked us, dragging us down a path neither of us had ever imagined. We started using regularly, hiding it from everyone. At first, it seemed manageable, a secret vice. But soon, it consumed us. The need for the next high became our driving force. We sold stuff: my old guitar, Tony's watch, anything to get money for another fix. As our addiction grew, so did our desperation. Our lives became a series of hazy days and nights, the drugs blurring everything else into insignificance. We dropped out of college, our dreams and ambitions lost in the fog of addiction. I remember looking at myself in the mirror one day, hardly recognizing the gaunt, hollow-eyed reflection staring back. My parents were worried sick, but I was too far gone to care. All that mattered was the next high. It was Tony who came up with the idea of the robbery. An easy hit, he said. An abandoned house, ripe for the picking. His eyes had that wild, desperate look I had come to know too well. I agreed, not because I wanted to, but because I didn't see any other way. We were out of money, out of options. We planned it for a week, scouting the place, an old house on the outskirts of town, seemingly forgotten by the world. We thought it would be simple: break in, grab whatever we could, and sell it for drug money. But we were naive, blind to the darkness that lay ahead, unaware of the horrors that house concealed. Little did we know, our desperate act was about to unveil a nightmarish reality far beyond the scope of our drug-addled minds. The night we chose to break into the house was draped in a thick, uneasy fog. The moon was just a faint glimmer behind the clouds, casting ghostly shadows on the streets of our once familiar suburb. Tony and I, driven by our insatiable need, approached the abandoned house with a mix of fear and anticipation. The house stood at the end of a cul-de-sac, its windows boarded up, the garden overgrown with wild weeds. It had a forlorn, haunted look, like something out of a horror movie. We joked about it to ease our nerves, but deep down, we were both scared. As we pried open a back window and slipped inside, the darkness enveloped us. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of mold and decay. Our flashlights cut through the blackness, revealing a scene of desolation, peeling wallpaper, broken furniture, a thick layer of dust covering everything. We began searching for anything of value, moving through the rooms with a growing sense of unease. There was an oppressive atmosphere in the house, a feeling of being watched. We shrugged it off as nerves, attributing it to our drug-addled state. Then we heard it, a muffled sound, like a whisper, coming from the basement. We froze, our hearts pounding in our chests. "Maybe it's just an animal," Tony whispered, but his voice betrayed his fear. Curiosity overcame our fear, and we slowly made our way to the basement door. The noise grew louder as we descended the creaky stairs, a mix of hushed voices and something else, a whimpering, a soft sobbing. What we found in that basement will haunt me forever. In the dim light of our flashlights, we saw them, girls, maybe half a dozen, all young, huddled together in fear. Their eyes were wide with terror, their faces marked with bruises and tears. In that instant, our plan to rob the house vanished. We realized we had stumbled upon something far more sinister, a den of human trafficking, run by a gang that was using this abandoned house as their hideout. Tony and I were no saints, but we knew evil when we saw it. The sight of those girls, so young and so scared, ignited something in us, a burning desire to help them, to save them from this nightmare. We whispered a plan, deciding to use our phones to capture evidence. We moved quietly, filming the horrific scene, the chains on the girls' ankles, the sparse, filthy room they were kept in. Just as we were about to leave, to go get help, we heard voices upstairs. The gang was back. Panic set in as we realized we were trapped in the basement with the girls. We had to act fast. I remember thinking how ironic it was, two junkies, at the lowest point in their lives, suddenly thrust into the role of heroes. But there was no time to ponder the irony. We had to save those girls, and ourselves, from the hell we had accidentally walked into. The voices above grew louder, coarse laughter, and the clinking of bottles indicating the gang was unwinding, oblivious to our presence below. Tony and I exchanged a glance, understanding the gravity of our situation. We had to act quickly. Whispering to the girls, we assured them we were there to help, not harm. Their eyes, filled with a mix of fear and hope, spurred us into action. We scoured the basement for anything we could use as a weapon or tool. Our hands found old pipes, broken pieces of wood, meager defenses, but it was all we had. I remember thinking about my parents then, about how disappointed they would be to see me in this state, yet how they always believed in doing the right thing. That thought bolstered my courage. As we readied ourselves, Tony pointed to a small window, high up on the basement wall. It was a tight fit, but it was our only chance. We helped the girls up, boosting them towards the sliver of freedom. One by one, they squeezed through, dropping to the ground outside. The noise upstairs changed then, a sudden shift that signaled they had noticed something amiss. Our time was running out. As the last girl made her way out of the window, Tony and I prepared to face the gang members. We heard footsteps coming down the stairs, heavy and foreboding. Tony and I positioned ourselves on either side of the door, our makeshift weapons raised. The door swung open, and the first gang member stepped in, a look of confusion on his face that quickly turned to shock as he saw us. Without hesitation, Tony and I sprung into action. The fight was a blur of adrenaline and fear. We swung our weapons, fueled by desperation and the desire to protect the girls who were now fleeing into the night. More gang members poured into the basement, and we knew we couldn't fight them all. In the chaos, we made a break for the stairs, pushing past the bewildered criminals. We emerged into the main floor of the house, a mess of noise and confusion. Our only thought was escape. We ran through the house, dodging gang members, our hearts pounding in our chests. The front door was in sight, but just as we reached it, we heard the girls' screams from outside. They had been caught. In that moment, Tony and I made a decision that would change the course of the night. We couldn't leave them. We turned back, rushing outside to face the gang members who had recaptured the girls. It was a standoff, us against them, with the terrified girls huddled behind us. The gang was armed, and we knew we stood little chance. But then, in a stroke of luck, we heard sirens in the distance. The police were coming. Seizing the moment, we charged at the gang members, using the element of surprise to our advantage. In the ensuing scuffle, we managed to free the girls again and led them to a nearby warehouse for cover. Inside the warehouse, we found a place to hide. The gang members were close behind, searching for us and the girls. We had to think fast. Tony found a heavy chain and lock, and together, we managed to secure the warehouse door, trapping the gang members outside. With the gang locked out, I dialed 911, my voice shaking as I relayed our location and the situation. Outside, the sounds of the gang trying to break in grew louder, but we held on, hoping help would arrive in time. The girls were shivering, some crying, their faces reflecting the horrors they had endured. We tried to comfort them, telling them help was on the way. And as we waited in that cold, dark warehouse, I realized that despite the mess Tony and I had made of our lives, we had been given a chance to make things right, even if it was just for one night. The warehouse, with its towering shelves and musty air, became our temporary sanctuary. We huddled together in the shadows, the girls' quiet sobs echoing in the vast space. Tony and I stood guard by the door, the heavy chain and lock our only defense against the enraged gang outside. The banging on the door was relentless, the sound of their fury a stark contrast to the police sirens that grew louder with each passing second. I held my breath, praying they would arrive in time. The girls clung to each other, their eyes wide with terror, but there was a glimmer of hope there too. Then, with a final, resounding crash, the gang broke through the door. We braced ourselves, knowing this could be our final stand. But as the first gang member stepped into the warehouse, the sound of police sirens pierced the night air, and red and blue lights flashed through the windows. The gang hesitated, their resolve faltering as they realized the police were upon us. Tony and I seized the moment, rallying the girls to make a break for the street. We burst out of the warehouse, the night air cool and crisp against our faces. Police cars skidded to a halt, officers pouring out with weapons drawn. It was a scene of chaos, but amidst it all, there was a sense of overwhelming relief. The police quickly apprehended the gang members, their handcuffs clicking shut like the closing of a dark chapter. Tony and I, along with the girls, were whisked away to the safety of the police cars. As we drove away from the warehouse, the adrenaline that had fueled us began to wane, and the reality of what had transpired hit me like a tidal wave. We had walked into a nightmare but had emerged as unlikely heroes. At the police station, the girls gave their statements, their stories painting a harrowing picture of abduction and exploitation. Tony and I were questioned too, our role in the night's events a complicated tangle of guilt and bravery. It was then that our own past caught up with us. The police recognized us from our previous misdemeanors, the petty thefts, the drug use. We were not just witnesses, we were suspects in our own right. Yet, in light of our actions that night, the police saw a different side of us. We had risked our lives to save those girls, and that counted for something. The decision was made to reduce our punishment, considering our role in rescuing the victims. We were sentenced to a year in prison, a lenient punishment given our past. But your behind bars was a time of reflection and transformation. Away from the drugs and the chaos of our previous lives, Tony and I vowed to start anew, to repay our debt to society and to ourselves. 2 weeks after our imprisonment, news came that the police had successfully dismantled the gang's operation. The ringleaders were arrested, their network of crime exposed and obliterated. The girls we had saved were reunited with their families, their ordeal finally over. As I sat in my cell, I pondered the strange twist of fate that had led us to that abandoned house. Our initial intentions, fueled by addiction and desperation, had spiraled into a night of terror and ultimately, redemption. I realized then that sometimes, in our darkest moments, we find the strength we never knew we had. We had set out to commit a crime but ended up righting a far greater wrong. Our journey was a testament to the idea that it's never too late to change, to make a difference. The year in prison passed with a slow, introspective rhythm. Tony and I, once slaves to our addiction, found solace in rehabilitation programs. We attended every counseling session, every workshop, driven by a newfound desire to turn our lives around. The memories of that night, the terror in the girls' eyes, and the adrenaline of our unexpected heroism became the catalyst for our change. During our time behind bars, we heard the news. The gang, notorious for their heinous crimes, had been systematically dismantled by the police. Their network of horror, which had preyed on the vulnerable, was now just a dreadful chapter in the city's history. As for the girls we had rescued, they were undergoing therapy, their resilience in the face of such adversity a beacon of hope. Their families reached out to us, their words of gratitude a balm to our guilt-ridden souls. We had started that night as part of the problem, but, in a twist of fate, we became part of the solution. Upon our release, Tony and our different men, the shadows of our past selves were still there, but they were just echoes, reminders of who we once were and who we vowed never to be again. We found jobs, small but honest work, and slowly began to rebuild our lives. Our story made its rounds, a bizarre tale of two troubled youths who stumbled upon a crime far worse than what they had intended to commit. In a way, it became a story of redemption, of finding light in the darkest of places. I often reflect on the path that led us there, the myriad of choices and chances that culminated in that fateful night. It's strange how life works, how moments of despair can lead to acts of courage, how wrongdoings can unexpectedly give way to redemption. As I stand now, looking back, I see not just the horror of that night, but also the hope it birthed. It was a turning point, not just for the girls we saved, but for Tony and me. We were given a second chance, an opportunity to right our wrongs and start anew. I've learned that it's never too late to change the course of your story, to transform the narrative of your life. Our past doesn't have to define us. Our actions, our choices, they're what truly shape who we are and who we can become. As I conclude this chapter of our family's story, I turn to you, the reader. Write in the comments below the video, what do you think about this story? Have you experienced similar situations in your life? Click the like button and subscribe if you like our stories.